Want to know why the average pop song is 3 to 4 minutes long? It's because when albums were first invented, the old 75s from back in like 1858, they could only hold about 3 or 4 minutes of music. 100 years later, they moved to the vinyl 45s, and they too could only hold about 3 to 4 minutes of music in their standard 7-inch press. By the time cassettes and CDs and minidisc players and the digital formats arrived, the damage was already done. 3 to 4 minutes per song is what an audience was accustomed to, and while longer music is certainly made, if that music ever wants to get played on the radio, then it better have a radio edit ready because it's going to get cut down to size. What has changed, and changed considerably, is album length. Your old vinyls could hold a max of 40 minutes, but as the format was retired and we moved to cassettes and CDs which could hold 80 minutes of music, we saw an explosion in the average length of albums. This is a graph that shows average album length for just hip-hop albums, and you can see the trend here, and it was mirrored in other genres as artists felt the need to deliver more songs, more minutes, more bang for the consumer's buck. It was a sense of more is more. Eventually, people just got tired of this. Obviously, more songs on an album doesn't make it a better album, and eventually artists became more confident in their work and that it can stand on its own 2 feet without being propped up by bloat that should have been left in the recording studio. The average length of hip-hop albums declined from a high of 75 minutes in 1998 to a low of 56 minutes in 2014. And here's when things get really interesting. In 2015, album length rose sharply across almost all genres. You want to know why? Streaming hit the mainstream. Spotify and Pandora became the go-to way of listening to music, and the way their algorithm sorts, suggests, and calculates revenue all favors longer albums over shorter ones. The more time someone stays on your album, the less likely they are to click onto another album, so albums got longer. On top of this, Billboard, which is the organization that calculates and reports on music sales and determines which are the best-selling albums of the month or year, they changed their calculation for the first time in 23 years, and they decided that from that point on, 1,500 streamed songs now equates to 1 album sold. Artists were now more incentivized than ever to go for lengthy albums, since streaming had become central to the way that success would be measured. This led to some really interesting decisions being made about what is and what is not included in an album, like when Drake released Views in 2016 and included Hotline Bling as its final track, a song that had come out a full year before. Now, did he do that because he felt like Hotline Bling belonged on that album as part of the statement he wanted to make, or did he do it because adding a track to his album, especially one as popular as Hotline Bling, was going to see the album do better on streaming platforms? The truth is, we'll never know, but we do wonder. Now, don't get me wrong here, Drake is an artist, just like everyone else who puts out music, and artists always have artistic intent behind what they do. I'm sure that Drake wanted to say the things he said in his 1 hour and 21 minute album, but he surely had an incentive to bring more to that album than he otherwise might have, because the economics of music evolved at that time of that album's release, and he was likely responding to that. More so than even music, the economics of video games continue to evolve at breakneck speed. Horse armor into online passes, into day 1 DLC, into season passes, into microtransactions, into loot boxes, into battle passes. It seems relentless, and you can't help but feel that we're only at the beginning of all of this. One of the more fascinating evolutions of the past few years is the idea of games as a service, which is the idea that the game you buy is more of an ongoing, long-lasting experience rather than just a finish it and you're done sort of deal like we've experienced over the past 4 decades of gaming. Regular content updates, weekend events, seasonal events, new items added, multiplayer, major DLC drops, all of these things are designed to keep you playing for longer periods of time, because woven into all of this is a business model that's designed to keep you spending. Like music in the streaming era, the more you're playing, the more the publisher is getting paid. So it's in the interest of gaming publishers to make their games last longer, even when the game itself doesn't need to be that long. As I look back on Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the 11th main game in the series, the core idea or memory or sensation that I associate with it is bloat. I love long games, and they are among my favourites. I'm pretty sure I skipped the whole young fiction genre in my teens because I played Baldur's Gate instead. I remember every damn stone in Morrowind because I spent so much time there. GTA 3 and Vice City didn't leave my PS2 for months on end. Every Final Fantasy game from 7 onwards. Mass Effect was my defining game of the Xbox 360 generation, and The Witcher 3 is among my favourite games of all time, including the astonishing DLC. And as I look back over all of those incredible games, I don't think for a moment about the bloat or the grind, I think only about their greatness. But Odyssey just feels long in a way that I have never experienced before, and that's because its opening act is strong and its closing act is phenomenal, but the solid 30 hours in the middle of that really drags. And it's this part that I remember more than any other because it was painful for me to push through. Many will love this section because it's just a steady grind of side content that provides a gameplay loop that they enjoy, while others like myself will lament the fact that their progress through the excellent main campaign is constantly stalled, as I'm forced to do dull and uninteresting side content. And much like Drake's decision to include Hotline Bling in views, we do wonder about why this bloat exists because of the economic equation in play. I'm not saying that this game is long and grindy so as to sell you microtransactions, but I'm also not ruling out that possibility, because the inclusion of the 50% XP booster in the store forces us to ask that question. We are being obtuse if we do not face into that question and leave some room for the possibility. It's absolutely not required to purchase an XP boost in Odyssey, especially if you enjoy the side content in this game. But if you're like me and you just want to enjoy Odyssey's main quest lines, then the inclusion of this optional XP booster will gnaw away at you as you trudge through your 20th bandit camp cleared, wondering if all of this is designed to get you spending instead of playing. I had not planned to do a full Assassin's Creed Odyssey review before I played it, because the truth is I hated Origins, and I wasn't interested in just shitting all over the next one in the series. I don't like doing reviews like that. But having spent 60 hours with the title now, and completing everything you can do except for some exploration and some side quests, this is such an important title to talk about. The evolution of its narrative design shows such promise. Its combat is so improved over Origins, but it has so much further to go. Its game systems are so ambitious and brilliantly woven into other game systems and the broader game narrative. There's so much good stuff here, but all of it feels obscured by the bloat. It's a natural evolution of the desire to make open worlds bigger without asking why they should be bigger. And it's the product of a business model that demands more time and more money spent without asking, have we gone too far? I enjoyed Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but I am fearful of the potential impact that it may have on the future landscape of AAA single-player games and the way they are designed and monetized, and today I want to talk about that and more. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Begin by challenging something that Assassin's Creed Odyssey is getting universal praise for, and that's the size of its world. Reviewers everywhere are applauding Odyssey for what is possibly the largest open world we've ever seen in a single-player game. It's huge, but I think the size of this world does far more to hurt this game than help it. Open world design is not new. We've been playing open world games for decades now, but it seems like in the last 10 years or so, open world design has become almost ubiquitous.
Present, appearing, or found everywhere.
I didn't choose that word by accident, obviously. Ubisoft have more than any other publisher driven the trend towards open world games, such that the majority of their franchises are now open world franchises, each of them sharing some core design philosophies underpinning them. Things like towers to unlock a view of an area, tons of map icons to explore, lots of on-screen UI pointing you where to go, lots of side missions to push you out into that open world, and a focus on systemic gameplay design rather than scripted storytelling. Ubi worlds keep getting bigger, just as all open worlds do from all publishers. But I've never once heard a valid justification for why these worlds need to continue to get larger. A movie isn't better when it's longer. A novel isn't inherently better when it has more pages. A multiplayer map in a first-person shooter isn't better when it's bigger. Yet the philosophy of more seems to permeate open world design with such alarming fervor that it almost feels exponential at this rate. From what I can tell, the assumption is that if we have more real estate in a game, then we have more range in the visual palette. One area can look like this, and the next area can look completely different because we've got enough square miles to mix it up. I think that's true if you do it right. Here's how Odyssey does it. This is a temple in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Here's another temple. Here's another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, and so on. I've seen this temple about 20 or 30 times as I've been playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey. The first time I saw it, I was awestruck. It looked amazing, so much detail, so huge. I climbed all over it just to check it out. But by the 5th time, I understood what was going on, and I really only cared if it had a sync point at the top of it. There are plenty of examples I can provide of this, but you get the point. Ancient Greece in Assassin's Creed Odyssey is massive, but because it has so many square miles to cover, it's necessary for the developers to copy and paste vast amounts of art assets across different locations, changing up some of the topography and layout to give the impression that we're exploring a new place, where each place really ends up feeling almost identical to the last. There are some exceptions to this. Stepping into Sparta for the first time, I remember that because there's nowhere else in the game where you have this layout. The Isu technology locations we visit are so striking because they're so different from the rest of the map, and they're all individually handcrafted. This game is capable of tremendous beauty, but most of it looks the same because the development team were forced to populate square miles rather than carefully curate specific memorable spaces. If you haven't done so, I recommend watching Jim Sterling's video where he talks about his love of the Yakuza games and praises its open world design because of the fact that it goes for small, memorable locations. I subscribe to the same school of thought. I remember every square inch of Hyrule Field in Ocarina of Time, which was also an open world game by the way, and because I had to know that space, I could form a connection with it, the likes of which I never achieved in any part of Odyssey. Its moments of arresting beauty so easily forgotten as you see the same sight again and again in various locations, revealing the fact that the first moment you saw that thing, it wasn't really that special after all. Beyond visual splendor, the other objective of gigantic open worlds is that they give more space for activities. If we have more real estate, then we have more towns, more bandit camps, more forts, more sync points, more stuff to collect. In this way, square mileage equals content, and in this regard, Odyssey will delight those who enjoy the simple pleasure of turning a question mark into a check mark. Now, I won't pass judgment on this sort of gameplay loop. I mean, I like the dumb, inane grind of games like Warframe or Destiny, so who am I to say that clearing a map of near identical activities is any less dumb? It's not. And I know a lot of people who love that, and that's fine. I actually totally get it. It can be really nice if you've got nothing else going on just to slip into that. But don't expect any variance within that model. You'll soon memorize the layout of caves, you'll soon see recurring patterns in fort design, you'll soon see the same bandit camps out in the woods, and you'll get endlessly frustrated whenever you see a marker out in the open water because it means you're going to have to do the underwater thing that sucks in pretty much every game. Finally, there's one other gameplay system that I feel really cheapens the impact of this open world, and that's, ironically enough, the new parkour system that they introduced in Assassin's Creed Origins. See, before that, in the old Assassin's Creed games, you had to look for places to put your hands if you wanted to climb something. Things like railings or ledges or whatever. You needed to have a thing you could climb before you could actually climb it. In this way, the parkour system meant that some parts of the world could be built such that they couldn't be climbed on or climbed over. You had to follow a path set down by the level designers, giving them control over the way you experienced an area. But in Origins, that system was changed such that you could climb over almost anything. Like, look at this, what the hell am I holding onto here? It's ridiculous. And it means that when I get to a town, instead of having to remember that this street connects with that street, which leads to this walkway, past that temple on the right, etc., I know I just push forward to walk over the top of everything. In Origins and Odyssey, I travel as the crow flies, and I don't really care what I'm flying over while I do that. Would the Citadel of Mass Effect have been as memorable if I could just ignore its walkways and climb over everything? Would the journey to High Hrothgar have been as memorable if I could just climb up a sheer cliff and then walk in the back door? Obviously, the parkour system in Assassin's Creed is a core part of the gameplay loop, and I would never propose abandoning it, but I really believe that it's just gone too far now. It provides too much freedom, such that the impact of world design is significantly lessened because I never really have to look at what I'm climbing over. I just push forward to win. Now, my point here with this section is to say that I feel that an open world game designed in the Ubisoft way, particularly here in Odyssey, really suffers from diminishing returns in terms of its impact on the player. It's striking at first, but after about hour 15 or 16, you've seen it all, even if you've only uncovered a small portion of the map. And my mind goes towards the sheer amount of hours required to produce this content and how much better those hours could have been spent had they been used to craft more Spartas, more places that are unique and that we remember after the first time we visit them. There's over 1,000 people working on Assassin's Creed games at any point in time, and I can't help but feel that their efforts are misdirected when they design an open world under this current philosophy. I think we'd see less developer crunch and a more meaningful, more memorable open world if these developers were directed to create something smaller and more intimate. But the most damaging consequence of this design philosophy is the way that it demands side quests to justify the existence of this space and force players out into this world to make use of it. Odyssey's side quests are the core of the bloat that spoils this otherwise excellent experience. So let's take a look at them now.
Who is this of Xesia?
This is the Mystios who's going to reignite our spark, my love.
Oh no! We've been through this. I can't satisfy you anymore. You're going to kill me with your lust.
Nonsense. I'm going to make you an elixir that will give you the vigor of a man a fraction of your age.
God save me. I cannot do this anymore.
Your husband is tired. Allow me to satisfy your hunger.
I've never been with a mercenary before. Very well. Let's see what you're made of.
Side quest design is this elusive holy grail in video games. It's almost impossible to get perfect. Just because one game does it in one way and gets it sort of right, doesn't mean that another game can do it in a similar way and not get it completely wrong. There's an X factor to side quest design that you can't quite put your finger on, but you know it when you see it. I think there's two underlying design principles that drive side quest design: gameplay incentives and narrative hooks. The gameplay incentives part is really clear. Complete X quest to get X item, to gain X amount of experience, to unlock X ability points, so on and so forth. The player is offered a path to power through these quests, and they can choose to either take it or not. If the incentive is good enough, the player will do it. If it isn't, they'll likely skip it, unless they're completionists. This is a style of side quests most commonly used in MMOs like World of Warcraft. The narrative hook part is much harder to land. If you're going to ask a player to go out there and kill 10 goats, you should at least give them some sort of reason why they're killing 10 goats. It doesn't really matter most of the time, but it's just polite window dressing so the player is at least somewhat immersed in the world and they can feel like the developer has put in at least a modicum of effort to offset the boring bullshit they're about to make you do. Different games approach the narrative hook differently. The Witcher 3 manages to pull off its side quest design because its moment-to-moment writing is really strong. Listen to this old woman just talk about a fry pan.
Wrapped me pan for protection, see? But he just asks all polite. Gran, got any birch bark by chance? Lilac berries or even a few coals? Nay, says I. And you must be right daft to pester folk at night with such foolery. But I sees he ain't listening, just staring at me pan like a magpie at a copper. Lend it to me, Gran. I'll give it back come morn. He's right baffled for what's he doing, frying in the dark. But I've got a soft heart, so I gave it to him.
Now you're literally doing a quest here about a fry pan in her house, but the writing is so smart and the voice actor's performance is so on point that you're invested in that fry pan. You care what's going on here because this NPC made you care about it, and that's art. Mass Effect uses its broader world to create its narrative hooks. When you're doing a side quest for Rex to help cure the genophage, which is a virus that renders his species sterile, you are so invested in that side quest because the story arc is so awesome and so central to the Mass Effect universe that you're just soaking up every detail as you're going through it. Sadly, Odyssey side quests don't have the moment-to-moment writing quality necessary to capture or hold your attention, nor do they have the deep connection to the world building that might motivate the player to dive in and learn more. A solid 90% of Odyssey's side quests are this.
We need to perform a ritual, but we can't do it without our ceremonial axe.
Sounds like you need to find that axe for Poseidon.
Then I insist you retrieve the axe for me.
Do you know where the axe is?
Bandits took it. There's a cave east of town. If you follow the path along the shoreline, I'm sure you'll find them.
I'll go take a look.
Because the motivation provided in these exchanges is so meaningless, Odyssey's side quests mostly feel like MMO side quests. Just vehicles to push you out into the open world to see it and to collect the necessary experience to progress to the next interesting story mission. They very much fall on the gameplay incentive end of the side quest design spectrum. There are absolutely some exceptions to this. There's a solid 10% of quests which are brilliant, to be honest, like this awesome grandma who just wants sexy times. But for every one enjoyable side quest, there's literally 9 others that are so forgettable that I struggle to remember them even now, a day after finishing the game. All of this would not be so problematic if you were not forced to suffer through these side quests as part of the game's core campaign. To be clear, ancient Greece is a heavily level-gated world, with each territory having a required level before you're able to operate effectively in that space. Going up against an opponent 1 level higher than you is sort of okay, 2 levels is pretty tough, and 3 levels is basically impossible. You may as well not bother at that point. So the entire time, the game is very tightly managing where you are and what you're doing. You'll move through the campaign fairly briskly until level 25, which is sort of the first 15 to 20 hours of the game. And I recall as I was playing this that I was thinking to myself, thank God they changed the level gating bullshit from Origins. In Origins, you had to grind side quests for hours on end to progress to the next campaign quest, and it was the #1 reason that I hated Origins. It drove me insane that I was forced to do these quests because so little effort had been put into them. Where games like The Witcher, it didn't bother me because the narrative hook part of that equation was working so well, and some of the absolute best content in The Witcher 3 were these incredibly well-written side quests. But in Odyssey, at level 25, you hit a hard wall. I had not done many side quests up to this point, and when I completed this campaign quest at level 25, I saw I needed to be level 32 to continue the main quest. Each level in Odyssey takes about an hour's worth of playtime to hit, so I was looking at a solid 7 hours of this.
So you want me to give you some drachmi?
You understand perfectly then.
It's all yours.
Now, the degree to which you're going to enjoy Odyssey is going to depend almost entirely on your attitude towards this forced level grind. And I think that's such a shame because without it, this game would absolutely be spectacular, and it would have been a title that I could recommend unreservedly to anyone, as I would something like Spider-Man or God of War. Just one of those games that has something for everyone on some level. But with the grind, Assassin's Creed becomes, yeah, it's good, but watch out. Or, man, you're gonna hate this if. And it's such a damn shame because the narrative that's woven into the core campaign quest is just brilliant when it's firing on all cylinders. Don't believe me? Let me show you. Ancient Greece is the birthplace of Western civilization. There were great civilizations before the Greeks, but the stuff they did stuck around and shaped our world today. The earliest Western text we have is Homer's Iliad. Herodotus was celebrated as the first ever historian. Hippocrates gave us the medical code that doctors still use this day. Pericles and his contemporaries gave us democracy and the rule of law. Socrates and his contemporaries gave us philosophy. Pythagoras and his contemporaries made huge advancements in mathematics. Aristophanes, Sophocles, Aeschylus, dozens of others gave us Greek drama and comedy. Phidias inspired the Greek sculpting style that has remained timeless ever since. The impact of the Greeks on our society today cannot be overstated. But in addition to this, the Greek pantheon and the story of its gods is among the most beloved mythical stories. Mighty Zeus with his lightning bolt, Artemis the hunter, Aphrodite, goddess of love, Poseidon, the vengeful god of the sea. Not to mention the beasts and monsters that stalk those ancient stories like the Cyclops or the Medusa or the Sphinx or the Minotaur. It was an age of imagination as much as it was an age of society and reason, and the achievement of Assassin's Creed Odyssey's narrative is that it manages to hit both of those beats while also telling a gripping tale of family redemption, while also leaning deep into the lore of the Assassin's Creed series. You play as either Alexios or Cassandra, two siblings separated at a young age when the Oracle decrees that one of them must die, cast off a mountaintop in Sparta, which, believe it or not, was actually a very common occurrence in ancient Sparta. What begins as a quest to track down your missing sibling and mother and father soon balloons into a broader Odyssey, thrusting you into the middle of the war between Athens and Sparta, the emergence of an all-powerful cult, the desire to retake your place in Spartan society, and a mythical quest to seal the gates of Atlantis. By far and away, the biggest gameplay change between Odyssey and Origins is that there's now a dialogue system allowing you to choose your responses to questions and make decisions, and these decisions can have huge consequences on the way events play out, from minor side quests to major milestones in the main story. It's this change more than any other that moves Assassin's Creed from an open world action game with RPG elements like we saw in Origins to a fully fledged RPG here in Odyssey. With this system in place, we're able to define the identity of our main character in a way that we haven't before. If we want to be the good guy, we can do that. We can extend compassionate words of advice and support, decline payments for jobs well done, show mercy to those we've defeated. More than any other protagonist in Assassin's Creed history, this hero is our hero, and we can shape both his broader story and his personality. It works, and I feel that after spending 60 hours with my Misthios, I've grown quite attached to him in a way that really resonated with me at the game's climactic finish. I will say that the motivations of this character are hard to connect with though, and that's because the game forces you to change allegiances so often. See, you're in the middle of the Peloponnesian War, which is the great conflict between Athens and Sparta of the 4th century BC, and each territory on the map is actually controlled by either Sparta or Athens. By completing objectives in each region, like clearing forts or looting nation chests and burning war supplies, you then expose the regional leader, who you can then assassinate, which will trigger a conquest battle between Athens and Sparta. You choose a side in each of those battles, and after the battle is decided, the forts in the region are repopulated, a new leader is installed, and you can begin the whole cycle again should you choose. This can create really awkward circumstances where you're fighting to kill lots of Athenians who have control of a region, and then when it comes time to complete the conquest battle, you can fight for the Athenians, which sounds really dumb, but you can do that. Or you can be on a main quest where you're desperately trying to demonstrate your loyalty to Sparta by completing a whole bunch of side quests, but you're also simultaneously murdering hundreds of Spartans and fighting for Athenians in conquest battles. When I first saw this regional conquest system, I had imagined that just as I could choose my responses in dialogue with other characters, I could choose who wins the Peloponnesian War by slowly but surely conquering each region of the map in the name of my chosen side. But I soon learned that this system only exists to trigger conquest battles, which give me a chance at epic loot, and after that I was really disinterested in it. Not only is it little incentive, but it really confuses a lot of the central motivations that your character professes to at various points throughout your Odyssey. But while the broader narrative is confused and contradictory, the more focused tale of family redemption is really gripping. Your sibling has fallen under the sway of the Cult of Cosmos, a precursor to the Templars that would later emerge in history, and you need to either kill your sibling or save them. Your choices along the way shape one of 9 potential outcomes to the story, and I was really invested in all of this while it was going down. It's slow to move because of how much side content is required, but when you are in it, you're absolutely in it. Throughout your journey, you'll do that very Assassin's Creed thing where you bump into the leading figures of the era, like Pericles of Athens, or Hippocrates the healer, or Herodotus the historian, and a lot of these become very central figures in your story. It's sort of a double-edged sword with these characters and their stories, because some of the quests are really well written and really leverage the significance of those characters. Like if you're doing a quest for the philosopher Socrates, you're going to be talking about the nature of man and good versus evil, and whether we should kill one man if it's going to save 100 others, and all that sort of thing. But on the other hand, the quests with these characters very often involve a lot of back and forwardism as you meddle in Athenian politics and tarry with personalities. See, there's really 4 acts to the Odyssey experience. There's the first 15 hours where everything's getting set up and it feels great. Then there's the next 15 hours when you're thrown deep into the Athens vs Sparta war. Then there's the next 15 hours when you're trying to reclaim your home in Sparta while also wrapping up your family story. And then there's the last 15 hours where you're trying to seal Atlantis. That second and third act is where you'll cross paths with these historical figures the most, and it's also the part of the game where the narrative drags the most. As cool as it is to hear Socrates ask rhetorical questions at first, it definitely wears thin after the 50th question he throws at you, and you'll start to see these conversations and the quests they throw your way as more of a pacing mechanism to slow down your main quest progression than as something really valuable or meaningful in the broader context of the game. But I really want to stress just how absolutely fantastic the last 15 hours of this game is, both narratively and mechanically. At this point, you've finished the family drama and you have 2 objectives left. Kill all the remaining cultists and seal the gates to Atlantis. Now, the cultist system is absolutely genius. It fits so perfectly with Assassin's Creed's lore. This nefarious cult of masked individuals has embedded itself in the upper echelons of the ancient Greek world, and as you play, you have to uncover their identities and assassinate them. Finding out who they are is baked deep into every game system. Some clues are hidden inside a fort, some of them are on regional leaders, meaning you have to weaken a territory to expose them, some of them are in naval battles or conquest battles, some of them are just hidden out in the wild. There's almost no part of this game that doesn't at some point touch the cultist system, and its impact is that it draws you out into the open world to find these clues in a way that's so much more engaging than the game's dull side quests. Obviously, this cult is analogous to the Templar Order we're used to, but this is by far the best expression of that lore in a gameplay sense, and I'm sure we'll see this system return in future Assassin's Creed games. It's just brilliant. And as for the Atlantis stuff, man, it is just the best. Pythagoras asks you to seal it because the power it holds is too great. He'll ask you to find the relics that can seal it, each of them hidden in a high-level area. You'll have to complete a quest chain to unlock the relic, which you'll find is protected by an ancient mythical beast, the Cyclops, the Minotaur, the Sphinx, and the Medusa. The final quest arc is just the perfect way to finish a game that spends a disproportionate amount of time on petty politics and personalities. It's the sweeping Homeric epic that the game feels starved for up to that point, and I think it's a shame that the game saves its best stuff for last, because I am certain that a majority of the player base won't push through the grind to see it. One of the things I hear most when people talk about the new Assassin's Creed game is not my Assassin's Creed. It's this idea that I don't care how good the game is, it's not really an Assassin's Creed game. It's sort of similar to how people talk about the Prey game from Arcane Studios, funnily enough, since Bethesda bought the IP and cancelled the sequel being made by Human Head Studios, and then put the name Prey on an immersive sim being developed by Arcane. A lot of people hate Prey purely for this reason, and they feel like if you're going to change a game so significantly, it shouldn't use a brand label or an IP to help smooth the transition. There was certainly a lot of truth to these complaints with Origins. Narratively, the game strayed really far away from the whole Templars versus Assassin thing, coming back to it only toward the end in a cutscene that felt very shoehorned in. That, coupled with the changes to parkour, combat, and the adding of the level gating and a bunch of other stuff, yeah, this was not an Assassin's Creed game, and I think anyone complaining about that certainly has a point. It's different here in Odyssey. I've already talked about the narrative links and the way the cultist system provides a very authentic Assassins versus Templars tale. On the one-hit kill assassination side, the developers have solved this in a fairly ingenious way as part of a broader effort to develop the RPG framework for the game's combat. Here's how it works. There are 3 different core damage stats that will determine your playstyle in Odyssey. There's the warrior damage stat, which basically buffs your in-combat damage, so when you swing a weapon in combat, it hits harder. Simple. The hunter damage increases your efficiency with a bow. Now, this is sort of an auxiliary or complementary spec rather than a core spec, since it's not quite efficient enough to make it your main method of playing, particularly on a controller where aim is trickier than with a keyboard and mouse. Still, you can put out a lot of damage with this spec if you use it as part of being a silent, distant assassin, almost like a sniper, and it works quite well in those circumstances. The final stat is the assassin damage stat, which as you'd expect increases your assassination damage. So if you build towards this and stack it as high as you can and will one-hit KO almost any target in the game with the exception of elite enemies and bosses. You're still going to have to fight these guys, but they will be severely weakened from your initial assassination strike, which gives you a big starting advantage. Supporting each of these stats is an ability tree aligned with that type of damage. The hunter tree will give you the ability to control the arrows as they fly or hit more targets at once. The warrior tree will give you the now cliche Spartan kick, which feels awesome by the way, as well as a number of other really ferocious, overpowering abilities. The assassin tree will aid your stealth and allow you to move faster, apply poison to your weapons, and other upgrades that fit with the whole assassin shtick. Best of all, you can actually respec at any time for free, so you're not locked to one playstyle throughout your playthrough. You can mix it up whenever you please. The gear system further augments this. There are 4 loot qualities: normal, rare, epic, and legendary, and the legendary stuff is very often collectible armor sets that provide bonuses when you wear the whole set. Things like 15% bonus poison damage, that sort of thing. There's also an engraving system for each slot, allowing you to further customize it to your taste, and you can actually upgrade each item as you go through your journey. So if you become particularly attached to one, weapon or armor set, you can bring it with you so long as you have the materials to keep it upgraded, which isn't cheap, but it's also very doable. They definitely got the economic balancing right on this one. I have to say that the RPG and loot system here is really straightforward and really simple, but it's very well put together. It's the perfect casual RPG system in that it's not particularly deep, but it does manifestly change the way you play and the decisions you make in moment-to-moment combat. It's really, really sound, and I honestly got sucked into the hunt for specific armor pieces or upgrade materials because the system really did win me over in the end. It's a big achievement, especially when compared with the pointlessness of Origin's fake RPG systems. Now, coming back to the earlier point of not my Assassin's Creed, what you can already see from this system is that if you want to be an assassin, you can do that now. It's just a trade-off since you'll be doing less damage in combat and you'll be less effective at range. In this way, being an assassin isn't the default option, it's a choice and it's yours to make depending on how you want to play the game. Personally, I love this. A lot of people didn't like the old Assassin's Creed combat, just as many people didn't enjoy the focus on stealth and assassination. This now gives you the choice to play entirely as you see fit. All of these RPG choices go into creating a combat experience that I have really mixed feelings about. See, in the past Assassin's Creed games, combat was highly reactive. You'd be out there with 5 guys standing around you, all sort of waiting to take turns attacking you, and then one guy would and you'd have to parry, and then one-shot him, and then the next guy would have a crack, and so on. It was this sort of choreographed dance with very specific dance moves, all of it about timing. In Origins, this was changed to be very proactive. Combat now had a light attack and heavy attack model, and your job was to basically overwhelm your opponent as quickly as possible. The problem was it was just so one-dimensional, as the entire thing was just about dodging, shield breaking, and waiting for your focus ability to charge. There was really only one way to play Origins, and it got old really fast. Odyssey's combat does provide a fair amount of range, propped up by these abilities you can select in your ability tree. So for me, since I chose the assassination build, my combat rhythm was typically open with a hero strike, which is a move that deals bonus damage based on my assassination stat, and then I'd apply poisons to my weapons, and then I'd typically de-shield an enemy if they had one, and then I'd just go ham with light attacks until my cooldowns were up again. So what I'll say about combat in Odyssey is that it feels like it's more about style than substance, and that it's good from far but far from good. Spend enough time with it and you'll begin to see all of the little flaws that make it very easily cheesed. For example, controller layout is actually really problematic. There are 2 ability wheels that each hold 4 abilities. One of them is for your ranged weapon and the other one is for your melee weapon. You can switch to a secondary wheel for each weapon, but to do that you need to hold L1 and then press down on the D-pad. Now this sounds fine, but it's actually really shitty to do in the heat of combat, and it means that you're going to just not bother using a lot of those secondary abilities because it just becomes too annoying. This is actually really important given how central your ability cooldowns are to the core combat rhythm, and a simple change of allowing us to bind our melee abilities to the range wheel would have vastly improved the combat. But more important than this though is the disruptive impact of invulnerability frames or iframes during combat. Your abilities each have a set animation with them that make you totally invulnerable while you're doing them. So you very soon begin to use this to your advantage by using these abilities the second enemies are about to strike. It really does break combat, to be honest, and particularly with boss fights, you'll find them extremely easy most of the time because of how often this mechanic can be exploited. And the thing is, the game's designers kind of know this, so they sort of build in these cheesy damage mechanics to counter your continued invulnerability. Like fire. Holy shit, fire in this game is absolutely fucking ridiculous. I can tank like 10 guys at a time, but if a single one of them has a fire weapon, I will run away because the second I am on fire, I completely melt. It's so stupid, so imbalanced. Bosses are generally these giant meat sacks that don't do very much, until they have this one ability where they can just one-shot you. Most of the difficulty you'll have during these boss encounters isn't staying alive 90% of the time, it's avoiding that one ability they use 5% of the time that will just instantly destroy you. It's a very casual combat system, but where the casual design was really well executed in the case of the RPG design, the casual combat framework provides just as many misses as hits. It's fun, and I feel like I'm being really nitpicky here, given that overall it works well enough. It's just that with a game 60 hours long, you really start to see all of this stuff clear as day. Had the game been a tighter experience overall, I probably wouldn't have cared about these little imperfections, but I feel like I've already made this point well enough. The game is very, very long. And I think now it's time we talk about why I think that is, and we'll explore why I think Odyssey is the most heavily monetized single-player game I've ever played.
Should you survive the Champion's Dive, you'll need to retrieve my trial token from a chest in the darkest depths of the water below.
Just give me the Malakas token.
Some might say you've paid to skip, others might call you an honorless coward. But know this, today you've invested in not dying. Excellent choice, champion.
So I'm really lucky because over the course of my time on YouTube, I've attracted the attention of a number of people in games development. I talk about games in a certain way that resonates with a lot of game devs who are obviously hardcore players and who are deeply invested in the future of the industry, so they reach out to me and we form friendships. Now, I have a pretty strong network across a lot of major developers and publishers, and one of the things I hear from most of them is the influence of the money men or money women, money people in the way that games are designed today. They tell me of a tension that exists between game designers who just want to make a really good game and the money people who want to take those ideas and find ways to monetize them. These money people, they have a lot of power. They cannot just be shooed away. They must be obeyed. If you're a passionate developer, you must sacrifice a portion of your creative vision at the altar of their KPIs. And that's not me talking out my ass about articles I've read on Kotaku. That's me talking with these developers myself about their stories. It's just a fact of life when you work for a major publisher, including Ubisoft. I really believe that the monetization of single-player experience is the next war on which the monetization battle will be fought. We've sort of hit an equilibrium with multiplayer games. We understand that if you're going to maintain servers and apply constant balance changes or develop new content, then you need a revenue stream to do that. We're okay with the sale of cosmetics and other non-core gameplay features within that, but we understand that paying for power is across the line, and we start to push back then. Publishers are absolutely going to keep trying to push what they can in this space, but I feel like they know we've drawn a clear line in the sand for now. On the single-player side, I think we've all been operating under the assumption that single-player games wouldn't be subject to the same aggressive monetization that multiplayer games see, but a few games have really challenged this. Deus Ex Mankind Divided sold its upgrade kits. Shadow of War famously imploded last year under the weight of the loot box controversy and eventually went on to remove loot boxes completely. Last month, it was revealed that Devil May Cry 5 will sell red orbs for real money cash, sparking instant outrage from its loyal community. The Assassin's Creed games have long had microtransactions. In fact, they were among the first to offer them in full-price single-player games. In Assassin's Creed 3, players could purchase a shortcut for the game's multiplayer mode, allowing you to skip straight to level 50. In Assassin's Creed 4, they offered some of the first microtransactions available to improve the single-player experience, offering packs that unlock map markers and provide materials such as wood or metal or stuff like that. Unity and Syndicate both allowed you to purchase Helix credits, which could lessen the grind somewhat, but these games really only took you about 15 or so hours to beat, so purchasing them seemed a little bit silly. In Origins, they further upped the ante. These time saver packs they sold would sell ability points, making your character inherently more powerful, as well as currencies. Odyssey goes the whole hog by selling cosmetics for your ship and horse, a variety of weapons, full armor sets, map unlocks, currency packs, but most importantly, they now sell a 50% XP booster, which applies permanently to your account. As I booted up the Odyssey shop for the first time, I was struck by how closely it resembled a mobile game. with its combination of items and currencies and boosters, but it wasn't until I hit the punishing grind at level 25 that I recalled the 50% XP booster that I saw earlier and thought to myself, I wonder. There's two ways you can look at the grind within Assassin's Creed Odyssey. You can look at it as a result of those passionate game designers who so wanted to provide an overwhelming amount of content to the player and wanted them to experience it, so they tuned XP gains with that objective in mind. Or you can look at it another way, as a result of the money people coming in and putting the screws to the developers, asking them to carefully tune the XP curve at certain points so as to frustrate and exhaust players, so that they might relent and spend. I did not purchase XP boosters, but multiple people have. Numerous reputable sources have concluded that the game is better when they are applied because it moves you through the grind faster so that you can get to the good stuff. I wish that I had purchased those boosters because I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever, none, that I would have enjoyed this game more had they been applied to my account. The mid-game is so long and so dull, and the start and the end of the game are just fantastic, and had I been allowed to just experience that, I would have absolutely adored this game, where now my feelings on it are very mixed. I know how this section of the review will be met because it's always the same whenever you talk about microtransactions. People will either get angry and complain about greedy publishers, or they'll defend these sorts of practices because they believe it's optional, and they'll talk about player choice. They'll say, just play the game and it's fine, or you're meant to do side quests, stop complaining. There's even a strong counterinsurgency I'm seeing where people who raise issues about microtransactions are now being labelled sensationalists or chronic complainers. But here's my take. Everyone was fine with loot boxes in their games until suddenly they weren't. The trend towards monetizing multiplayer games happened way faster than with single player games. And I think 2017 and Star Wars Battlefront 2 represented a crash of sorts, where things had gone too far after building up for too long. Overwatch's loot boxes are perfectly fine from one perspective, but on the other hand, they softened the ground for what EA would later attempt to do with Star Wars. I think the parallels here with Odyssey are very important to draw. I do not think that Odyssey is ruined by its microtransactions, far from it in fact. I think this is an excellent game in most regards. I just think that it's too long and that its length ends up hurting it more than helping it. But while I don't think that Odyssey is ruined by its microtransactions, I do think they soften the ground for more ambitious single-player monetization in the future. And then in the years to come, when the crash finally happens as it did with Star Wars Battlefront 2, we'll look to Odyssey as we do to Overwatch, as a warning sign overlooked and a herald of things to come. But the good news is that that's a problem for tomorrow, where Odyssey is here now for us to enjoy. And if you're looking for a massive open world, a gripping story, hundreds of things to do and collect, a robust RPG system and flashy combat, then there's very little chance that Odyssey will disappoint. It's Ubisoft's most ambitious entry into the Assassin's Creed franchise, and if you can push through some of its more drawn out sections, it's absolutely worth the price tag, and then some.